Radio 161, great to make the hook up there, Matt.
They're about.
Yeah, Matt, J. Juliet Alpha Yankee was my name for your further information.
Hi, this is cbradiomagazine.com, and today we've got a special treat. We're going to take a look at a new Magnum 350 watt radio. Magnum's been working on a new project. This is basically going to be an S3 Magnum, and it has a special amplifier section on it that's going to produce the higher output. They've taken the transistor that currently is used in the RFX 75 system, and they've taken 4 of those to create the final section in this radio and produce the high output. The radio from the factory does come with a little note basically saying that the radio is set up from the factory for a 1 watt minimum dead key, 70 watt maximum carrier, and you don't want to go higher than the 70 watt carrier, otherwise it voids the warranty. Probably if you go real high or something, you could damage the finals and the radio, so no need to do that. But 70 watt carrier, and then it should be producing its full power on the PEP swing. So we'll take a look at this radio. This is what the box looks like inside, and let's take everything out here and have a look at each piece. Something interesting, when we unpacked the radio, we did find a new microphone we haven't seen from Magnum before. It looks like a new design. It's not something I've seen previously. It's got the Magnum emblem on it there on the front, and just a standard stock microphone it looks to be. We do know that a lot of people like stock microphones on these radios, like an SRA 158 from Ranger. The Magnum radios are very loud on their audio, so they don't really require power microphones, and sometimes you can really get some distortion if you try and boost your audio too much using the microphones. So a nice quality stock microphone is usually a good plus. So hopefully Magnum's designed something here that's going to work well with this radio, and we'll be able to give it a good test on the air and see what we think. Okay, we've unpacked the radio, we've powered it up. As you can see, it says Magnum S3 on the front. Even though this is the Magnum S3 350 version, they do use the original radio chassis from the original Magnum S3. The radio controls and functions will all be the same as the original Magnum S3. It does have the Top Gun modulator, AM/FM options, and once again it's going to be a quite loud modulating radio. And what they do on the bottom cover is they replace the bottom cover speaker, and instead they put on the amplifier section on the bottom of the radio. The amplifier section has a large heatsink along the bottom to dissipate the heat. It runs the entire length of the radio. This radio is going to be capable of reaching approximately around 300-350 watts. It is going to draw somewhere between 40 to 45 amps at maximum. And that's also, you know, once you turn up the modulation a little bit, that's what it's going to be hitting. So it does have larger style power wires, which we'll go into and show you. Let's go over the face of the radio for those of you who aren't familiar with the Magnum S3. We've got a small meter here. It's not huge, but definitely gets the job done. And it does have the blue LED illumination. We've got a volume squelch knob. The volume control here is your on-off control. Over here we've got a mic gain and an RF gain control. Here we have your band selector, and once this radio is converted for export frequencies, so it's no longer 10 meter radio, it becomes a export radio and covers the 11 meter band. The D is the 11 meter band, and we will show you how to convert this radio. This radio does have the turbo echo from Magnum, and it's a very good echo. People who own the S3s, X6s, S9s know that. There's a volume control here and a delay, so the amount of echo and the delay of the echoes on the outside. Here we have our power control and our talkback control. The power is going to be the inside knob here, and this is variable. And you can set this radio up with a 1 watt dead key, anywhere up to a 70 watt dead key, and then swing upwards from there with modulation up to the 300-350 watt range. The outside here is to control the talkback. You can adjust your talkback, it's variable, and these radios, the one thing that's really nice about them is they do come stock from the factory with the echo and the talkback, and they work very well together. You're not going to get a huge amount of feedback or other things, and it's all variable and very clean sounding. Across the top we've got AM, FM, PA functions. We've got our Top Gun modulator. Top Gun modulator allows you, when it's on, to lower the dead key down real low and then swing up real high. We've got a noise blank A&L function, which I'll note that they work very well on these radios, so if you do get a lot of electrical static noise in your vehicle, this does cut out most of it. And it's got a 10 kilohertz switch here. The RXTX light, it's going to be green for receive, red for transmit. Now if you do have an SWR issue, this light also functions as an SWR warning light. The SWR function, when you're transmitting, it'll be red, and if your SWR goes above a safe level, it'll start blinking, and you'll see that light blinking on and off. Over here we've got your LED display, 1 through 40, and we've got your channel selector. The microphone connector here is a 4-pin, and it does come with a stock 4-pin microphone. It does accept a standard Cobra, Galaxy, other power microphones, so you can easily plug in your D104 or whatever power microphone you want to run if you do decide you need to run a power microphone with these radios. In most cases, I do not recommend that. It's not really necessary. Like I said, a good quality stock microphone can do wonders with these radios and make them sound really good. The stock microphone on this radio actually sounds pretty good so far, so may not even need to replace the microphone. Let's take a look at the back of the radio. We'll show you these new power cords on this model and talk a little bit more about the amplifier section. Okay, we're going to start off with this angle, and it'll show the power cord and the connector. Our power cord is going to come out here. It comes into a large connector, and this is a quick disconnect, so the two pieces can disconnect from each other. It uses a heavier gauge wire, and it needs to, since it can draw anywhere, 35, 40 amps, 45 amps. It's got a 50 amp fuse in there, so if for some reason something goes wrong, starts drawing, there's a short, it will pop the fuse. One thing I'll just show you is, I do have my Helix coax on here. When you run a 350 watt radio, you need to make sure you're not running this with some rinky-dink system. So if you're someone who's currently running a 4 watt Radio Shack radio and a little Radio Shack magnet mount antenna, you cannot just plug this radio in and start talking. You need a system that is properly set up. What that means is you need a system that's able to handle the amount of power that this radio is going to be putting out. When you're going to run a high power radio, you're going to need to make sure your wiring runs straight to the battery with this. You're going to want to make sure you do a fuse on the positive terminal at the battery with another 50 amp fuse, just in case something happens along the way where your wiring runs from your battery to your radio. When you set up and start running high power, you need to make sure you have low SWR. You need to use quality coax and have a quality antenna. And I just want to mention that now because a lot of people run into problems when they start using high power radios. They think it's the radio, but it's because their antenna system, coax things are inferior. So good stuff. When you go to hook this up, make sure you have good quality equipment set up. Okay, looking at the back of the Magnum S3 350, you can see the heat sink along the bottom of the radio here. There's also a heat sink on the radio, just like the standard S3. Here we've got a switch, and this is going to be a switch to turn on or off your SWR circuit, if you want to turn that on or off. There's also an option here that if you did have the nitro light up knobs on the front of the radio, that's so you can turn those on and off. We've got our antenna jack, our power cord. Instead of the 3-pin normal power cord, you can see that the large power cord gauge goes in there, and here's our quick disconnect, kind of like just an Anderson power pole connect. It's got a frequency counter jack here, so you can plug in a plug-in frequency counter if you want to run that with your radio. There's a PA jack here and an external speaker jack here. Now the external speaker jack, if you do use a Magnum S3 350 radio, you will be utilizing this external speaker jack, and I'll explain that in just a second. Alright, now I would mention that external speaker jack. The Magnum S3 350 does come with its own external speaker, which you will have to use. And the reason you have to use an external speaker is because the Magnum S3 350 amplifier unit is placed underneath the radio. It's nice and compact, but it does take up the room where the internal speaker normally would go in a regular S3. So you don't have an internal speaker on this radio, you do use the external speaker. They supply their speaker with the radio. It's a Magnum ES12 heavy-duty extension speaker. It's got a good-sized 4-ounce magnet on it, 8-ohm speaker, 500 hertz to 5 kilohertz frequency response range. It's nice. It's not a super cheap, diesel or workman type speaker. It's a little bit heavier duty. It's got a nice feel to it. It's not, going to be the super high-end type of external speaker, but definitely sounds pretty good when we hook the radio up. Okay, so let's talk about the bottom of the radio. The heatsink, as I mentioned, does run the entire length of the radio. It's very substantial, and it needs to be. When you have a radio with this many transistors in it that are high-power transistors putting out a lot of wattage, you're going to generate heat. So we do have quite a substantial heatsink on the bottom. Important thing is when you do hook these radios up, you don't want these radios sitting on the ground on carpet or something. These radios need to be in the air. There needs to be airflow, you know, so that the air can flow through the vents and properly cool the heatsink. If you have something sitting on top that's you know, not allowing venting of them, then you might get problems with overheating. So when you mount these radios, make sure you hang them properly, good airflow, good room on that. Now this whole section is hooked into the bottom cover. It's all one piece, and we'll show you as we remove this what it looks like when you take it off. Alright, when you do open the radio and you remove the bottom cover, which is the amplifier section, it does expose the radio, and we can see the inside of the radio. As you remove the cover, you have to be very careful because the wires are quite short as they run here. You don't want to tug or pull on those because they're attached to a circuit board for the input for the power. So the wires are short. You have to be careful. You really have to just kind of lean it up or lay it off to the side very gently. You're not going to have a whole lot of play. You may want to lean it up against something so that you're not tugging on anything. Okay, so if you look off to the right here, this is our amplifier section. It's housed in this unit here, which is mounted to the large metal base of the radio. The base of the radio is very heavy, and that's where the majority of the weight of the radio comes from. When you first pick up one of these, you'll say, wow, this thing's heavy. It is the large heatsink that's on the bottom. So the amplifier section is in here. We will open this up and show you a little bit later in the video what that looks like. For right now, let's talk about converting this radio from a 10-meter radio for export use for extended frequencies. Okay, when you receive the Magnum S3 from the factory, the radio is set up for 10 meters, and if you do want to modify the radio for extended frequencies to go beyond and above and below 10 meters, you do have to do a modification inside the radio. So from the factory, it covers 28.315 through 29.655 megahertz. Once you modify it, it can be set up for 26.065 to 28.755. Now it also can be programmed to go higher, above and below that even. We're not really going to go into that since most people probably won't be interested in that feature. What we're going to show is how to modify the radio to get into the export or fixed mode, and that includes the 11-meter CB band. First thing we'll do is we'll look on the left-hand side of the radio. The channel selector knob's up here. Once you open up the radio, you've removed the bottom cover with the amplifier section. Underneath here is where we're going to be working, so we do need to remove this board here. There's just one screw holding it on. You'll unscrew that, gently lift it off, place it off to the side, and then we're going to be able to access the area we're going to work on. Okay, so we have zoomed in on that front area. It's just behind the channel selector. It's on a board here that we're looking at. There's going to be two jumpers, and jumpers are basically just little pieces of black plastic that have wire inside them that connect two pins on a board. What we're going to do is we're going to just pull off this jumper right here. There's two of them, A and B. And we're just going to pull off the one on the inside here, away from the side of the case, and I'll show you what it looks like after we lift that off. Okay, so we've slid the jumper upwards. It just slides off, and it exposes the two pins. When they're no longer jumped, that opens it up for the export frequencies and also 11 meters. And just to show you, the jumper is just a tiny little piece of plastic here, and that's what you'll be pulling off. Okay, looking at the inside of the radio, there are some variable adjustment pots on the radio where you can make adjustments for your modulation. You can adjust the carrier and things with the inside pots, but I'm not actually going to show those since the radio is variable from 1 watt to 70 watts, and because you really don't want people messing with that high carrier anyway because you could cause problems with the radio, we won't really discuss where those points are. We are going to show the modulation adjustment if you do want to turn up the modulation on the radio, which can result in a little bit higher output swing. But once again, the dead key is variable from the factory on the front control from 1 watt up to 70 watts. So you know, you don't really need to mess with anything inside the radio in terms of output. The modulation adjustment point is going to be VR14 inside the radio. It's actually labeled. It says mod on it, and that's going to be right here. If you turn it clockwise, it'll increase your audio level. If you adjust it counterclockwise, it'll reduce your audio. Okay, this is our amplifier section of the inside of the radio. This is on the bottom cover. We did take the little protective cover off, and for most of you, I don't ever suggest opening this up because there's no reason to. But we've taken it off so you can see what's inside to power the radio for output. does use, once again, 4 of the ERF 7530 transistors. The same transistor that's in the RFX 75 that's on the back of like the Omega Force 257s. In those situations, one of these will produce around 75 watts. You can see there's 4 of them in a row there, and these are your 4 ERF 7530 transistors. They're in a push-pull parallel setup, so definitely powerful radio. Amplifier section is going to definitely heat up. It's going to get quite warm on that bottom heatsink during operation, and once again, that's why you need to make sure it's clear and has lots of airflow. Okay, now that we've had a look around the radio, let's talk a little bit about performance and also kind of who's going to be interested in these radios. As far as the Magnum S3 units go, receive on these has always been really good. Never had any problems. They're going to be as good as any CB radio. You know, most exports are a little bit better, a little bit more sensitive receive. The output on the radio obviously is going to be in the 300 range. Very strong output. It's a high power radio. The modulation on the Magnum line, if you're familiar with Magnum at all, the S3s have excellent modulation, very loud AM modulation. This radio does come with the Top Gun modulator, which you can turn on, and it allows you to lower your dead key real low and swing up really high. It's pretty impressive how much it can swing from a low dead key. Now, as far as the AM FM side of it goes, most people probably going to be using AM in the US on these. For durability wise, these are tough radios. The Magnum line, a lot of guys have had them in their trucks now for a number of years. It's been out for quite a few years. I've never had one fail on me. I've had Magnum S3, S6, S9. I think durability wise, the main question would be the amplifier stages, and historically people kind of haven't been concerned about having internal amplifiers inside radios. And that kind of stems from some of those early models that first came out. They weren't Magnums necessarily, but some of the other brands, and they did have some failure rates and things like that. But a lot of the manufacturers now have worked that out, either with larger heat sinks, fans, and things like that. So high power radios these days are going to be more reliable than they were previously. And a lot of it also has, when they talk about tuning these things, you can't just max these suckers out. You will get overheating, you will get issues, and then you do get failures. So you need to run within what they're talking about, the specs, a maximum 70 watt carrier. As far as those who are going to be interested in the radio, the trucker industry, definitely truck drivers, is going to be looking for radios a lot of times that don't have external amplifiers. They don't want to have to add an amplifier. They may not be, room for it in the truck. They may be switching around trucks, things like that. These radios are nice. You can hook them up if you have terminals inside the truck. They do need to be strong enough to handle 40 to 45 amps, but you can hook these radios up, run them standalone, good wattage. As a driver, you can get out and talk where you need to, when you need to. So I think truckers will definitely be interested in this radio. As far as the hobbyists, the guys that like to talk on AM, channel 6, 11, 28, 19, things like that, those guys are going to like this radio. It's a standalone DX radio, basically. Loud modulation to get you heard, and then it's got the power to stand up behind it to get you out there in DX land. In the range for what it's doing for wattage, the price is coming in a little bit lower, about $100 lower than some of the other models that were out there from other manufacturers that were in that 300 to 400 watt range. So you're getting that, famous Magnum audio and high power for a little bit less cost. Nice new radio on the market, Magnum S3 350, and we'll post pictures and a written review as well on our website, cbradiomagazine.com.